Don't you ever miss the good old days of Blizzard? When they actually made the effort to try and connect with their player base. When people came together into gigantic venues just to have fun and enjoy themselves, instead of being told,
"You think you do, but you don't."
And this is where I would put my memories, if I had any. You see, I got my first taste of World of Warcraft in the expansion Battle for Azeroth. And what were they battling for? Who knows? All I remember is seeing this lady do this, the other lady do that, and I was duped. Their marketing worked. And there I was, playing my first MMO. And after spending 2 patches of learning the game, I had an insane amount of fun in the last season. Corruptions, Azerite essences, and Azerite traits, all combined like macaroni in a pot. But as the fart cloud lady says,
savor it. Nothing lasts.
Here I am 2 college degrees later. Turned Omega civilian and still reeling from Shadowlands PTSD. Debating myself on why the hell am I finishing this checklist? You're doing it to get the goodest boy, of course. Isn't that right? Who's the goodest boy? What am I even doing? Logging on just to chase pixels. Pixels of a dog. Why do you have so many buttons on my keyboard? Why do I have to read the technical manual every time there's a new season? Why do I join raids that expect me to know everything in the first week? Why do I wait 30 minutes to get into a dungeon group only for others to fuck up and be blamed by pulling with Starfall? Am I still even having fun? Has my yacht turned into a yacht while I was busy chasing pixels? Maybe it's time for me to stop playing this game. Or maybe it's time for something different, something fresh. Maybe it's time to remove all this third-party stuff I have installed into my game using this other third-party add-on recommended by this other third-party website. Maybe it's time for me to make another character. Maybe it's time to level with a faction I've been ignoring, without heirlooms to speed me up. Maybe it's time to play the game the way it is no longer meant to be played, where you enjoy the world and the atmosphere, instead of wiping for the millionth time on a raid, or spamming dungeons to get your weekly vault. Now, a common saying in the MMO community is that you need to play 100 hours of an MMO before it starts getting fun. But if you play a game for 100 hours, yet you didn't enjoy a single one of those 100 hours, then what is the purpose of playing video games? Video games are for entertainment. But since there is no one that hates me more than myself, judging by my decision to enter and finish medical school, let's play this video game for 100 hours without add-ons, and see how the game works without any external help. You've all been good, but now I have to take you out back and... Now this is a screen I know, especially the left side of this screen, because everyone knows what kind of people play the Horde. Now a thing that always catches my interest with WoW players and MMO players in general is how obsessed everyone is with playing a female character. And typically those female characters are elves that look like this. And I am no different because I will also be playing a female character and reusing a joke as old as time. And if you play Horde, there's only one real option. Unlike the Alliance, which has absolutely zero furries and scalies. Now my very first character in WoW was an Arcane Mage. And I used that Arcane Mage to unlock the edgy elves. And since I never had an emo phase in real life, I turned that character into a Shadow Priest. So it makes sense to make a counterpart in the Horde. A polar opposite to a broody emo elf, I guess? And I think I've only played through the Blood Elf questline once, and I don't remember it at all. So let's go back to Sunstrider Isle, and immediately we're bombarded by a cutscene. And I have zero idea what this guy is talking about, but I remember this is the voice of the druid guy in Warcraft 3. Oh, and Kael'thas, I know that guy. And since he's yapping, I'm also going to join in the yapping. Before we start, I would greatly appreciate it if you dropped a like on the video. And if you would like more MMO content, please hit that subscribe button. As a pretty new YouTuber, everything is greatly appreciated. Eventually, he does stop yapping, and I still have no idea what he's talking about. And we are assaulted by the most barren screen of all time. By default, you only have one action bar at the bottom. And if you've played this game at all at level 70, you're going to need way more than that. And I mean way more. I feel like all the action bar the default UI has to offer has to be automatically turned on. But the other parts of the UI are still okay. The minimap is clean and visible. You can see your bags and how many inventory slots are left at the bottom right. They even encourage your account security by giving you 4 free slots for an authenticator. And surprisingly, it's free. How very un-Blizzard of Blizzard. You have a basic chat box to the left, but your health and mana is found in this Asian-sized frame. It's a bit small and kinda hard to see even. Is there a way to enlarge it? But before we enlarge anything, let's pet the local cat. Thankfully, this cat is possessed by a nicer demon than usual, and so we escape unharmed. Okay, no more fooling around. We're supposed to protect the homeland. And you're insane, lady, if you expect me to read this wall of text. Nope, I am at home, I will not read. Okay, fine, I'll skim a little bit. So we have to kill some mana worms. But before we do any of that, let's fix the UI a little bit. Much better. The small things do make a big difference. So let's go around and start butchering some mana worms, which are technically neutral because their health bar is yellow, maybe to avoid some idiot player getting mauled because they were too busy alt-tabbing, reading a guide, or multitasking with a second monitor, which they wouldn't have because it was 2007. If you've played this game for a lot, then you will probably have access to something called heirlooms, which are equipable low-level items that scale with your player level, and it will remove 70% of your gearing. 70% because not all slots are covered. Irregardless, the heirlooms represent a very big spike in power, and this becomes especially evident when you're doing old content in an old zone. The quest reward system is absolute dog water. For example, if you quest in a Battle for Azeroth zone, you will consistently replace your items, but if you quest in these 2007 zones, you could go 20 or 30 levels without getting an item for a slot. And the worst feeling is when you complete a quest and it doesn't give you anything useful at all. Like, look at this item. This type of quest reward design is not present in the more recent expansions. It is not present in expansions from Mist of Pandaria onwards, I think, and it feels like the old world has been completely forgotten. And that's a shame because just look at how beautiful the old world is. Well, how beautiful it is from afar. Just don't stare too long at the trees or the shrubs. After ruthlessly murdering a bunch of creatures, I think we're done with the initial starting area. And you know what I've learned? Absolutely nothing. I'm still as clueless about the story as I was before. But the important question is, was I enjoying myself? And yes, I am enjoying myself. I was just walking around and enjoying the atmosphere of the game. And the music is beautiful. It's quite relaxing not chasing after levels while looking at the clock. Just walking around slowly, with your map open. What can I say, old habits die hard. What I didn't like was having to reset my UI. I had to enable the action bars, keybind everything all over again, and I'm still left with an inferior UI. The base UI is really workable, but it's just not nice. But at least I don't miss the damage meter. Yet. Likely because I don't need it as of now. I spend the next few minutes exploring and finding areas with absolutely nothing in them. No enemies to kill, no chests to open, no quest givers to pester you. Oh well, what a waste of time. A good waste of time, but we have a land to protect. We go to the next quest area and find some more jarring out of place Minecraft trees, together with trees that look like they come out straight from a pop-up book for elementary school kids. Which doesn't stop us from reaching the next quest hub. And you know what that means. Take a few quests, try your best to read, kill some bad guys, take their loot. But I have been paying attention, so these guys are the wretched, which means they are blood elves who are deprived of mana. And if I remember correctly from Warcraft 3, elves are addicted to magic and they need something called the Sunwell, which I haven't seen at all. Will we ever even see it again? I remember doing some very bad things with that Sunwell with Arthas. Something about pissing on it, or was that his father's urn? Well, one of those two. I get to the next area, Eversong Woods, where we kill a bunch of night elves, a few arcane wraiths, a boatload of murlocs, encounter our first human being who completely ignores us, and eventually reach level 10. Now level 10 unlocks 3 things, which is the mounting system which lets you move around faster, a choice of 3 specializations based on your class, and the talent tree system, 1 for your class and 1 depending on the spec you chose earlier. Now this is where leveling actually gets fun. So for every level you get 1 point. The first point being in the class tree and then your next point being in the spec tree. And this alternates until you reach level 70. Now the class tree for priests is a bit problematic, but we're going to talk about that later. For now we get an improvement to Shadow Word Death and start keybinding our newly acquired spells. And feeling like an absolute peacock, it's time to finish the other quests in the zone. Now the design in quests in old zones is actually very different, in the sense that there is a lot of backtracking. You will frequently circle your map around at least 3 times. When you finish a quest, there could be a chance that you will unlock a quest in the previous area you've already been in. Or you could get a quest from 2 separate sides of the map and they will ask you to go to the same area. And of course there's a high chance you've already completed the first quest. so you will have to backtrack. And honestly, I am not a fan of this quest flow design. This would be okay if there was something to do in between, like picking useful stuff up, or just a bunch of mobs you can farm that will actually drop something useful. It's the way the old developers of World of Warcraft forced you to explore the world, and also in a way artificially extending the amount of time you spend, because you only have to design one zone and have the player run around it 5 times. It's the perfect way to waste your time, and thankfully they've moved away from that quest flow design. It kind of worked when we didn't have social media and Discord and a second monitor to keep us entertained, but now it just doesn't work. We just have a lot less free time nowadays, and nobody really wants to spend a long amount of time walking. And this gets worse when you're rewarded with absolute dog shit, or when there's no reward at all. And that is a very common occurrence in the old zones. These old zones are primed for a remake, to be honest. After my 4th trip around the zone, I think this is the last quest in the area, which involves me doing an alcohol run for a bunch of drunk people. And that pretty much sums up the college experience, to be honest. But these guys are not vibing with me. Well, time to leave, I guess. Onward to the Ghostlands. Now, I don't remember this place in Warcraft 3, but I'm going to assume this is the area where Sylvanas basically told Arthas how to get into Silvermoon, where she was like, this gate is protected by keys, and these keys are definitely not scattered around this zone, so they will never be yours, which is pretty much Netflix shows nowadays. Now, the quests in the Ghostlands are basically kill a bunch of undead, except in this zone we encounter the first quest I absolutely hate, and that type of quest is called an escort quest. And it typically goes like this: you free a prisoner, and instead of running out of the building using the path you've cleared out for them, they choose to go to the scenic route instead. Like this, I've cleared the central atrium and there's a path right there, and instead she chooses to go through this path, which is filled with undead. The NPCs also typically RP walk, which is code for walk very slowly. Why can't these guys just follow me instead and walk at the speed that I'm walking at? Or at this case, running at? And this is one of the most boring quest types I've ever seen in a video game. I absolutely hate this. And to top it all off, they even add RP on top of the RP walk. So they just stand there shouting, look, there's a tunnel. Yeah lady, I know, I entered through that tunnel. And to spite you further, once the quest ends and you escort them outside, they will actually start running. Yeah, wow, thanks for not doing this earlier. Escort quests are the worst thing ever in WoW. That and Shadowlands Covenants. And this pissed me off so much I went back to Tranquillion, and to my surprise there were actually a lot of players online right now. Pretty nice to see the world is still kind of alive, but no one really interacts in low-level zones. Mostly because there's no actual point in talking to other people. There's almost no group challenges in the game, and also everyone is busy leveling. Like me, for example, because we eventually get the last quest in the zone. And the thing I like about this particular quest zone is that the end boss is actually an end boss. Most end bosses in leveling are just regular normal grey mobs that take you 5 seconds longer to kill. But Darkan Drathir here will actually slap you around. And he even occasionally casts a fear. And if I wasn't healing myself occasionally, I would have probably died. I eventually bested him though, and then I only realized much later that the only reason this fight was hard was that I was not utilizing this item called the Sunwell Orb, which is supposed to damage and silence Darkan. When I first saw this item, I saw it was worse than the one I got equipped. And so I didn't even bother reading the text. And I quickly realized that gaming has rotted my brain so much. But this brain rot is probably terminal. So instead of worrying about it, we go to the next zone instead. And people always say that Wrath of the Lich King was the best expansion this game ever had. So I decided to continue the journey in Northrend. And this should be familiar to me as a Warcraft 3 player. But I'm still left wondering, why do people consider this to be the best expansion ever? Was it Arthas, whose story spanned all the way back to Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos? Now I have to admit, I was a real fan of Arthas. Especially Death Knight Arthas. He was just so bad. It was good. And by bad I mean evil. And it's maybe because he wasn't written to be a morally grey character. Characters who commit tons of genocidal war crimes and then suddenly they have a change of heart and are now forgiven? Like, what the hell is that? Was it the atmosphere or the general vibe of a zone? Or was it the lack of a dungeon finder which forced people to interact? Whatever the nostalgia those boomers had, I can only speculate. But while I was questing in this zone, I just enjoyed it. Sure, questing was kind of bad because the quest objectives were just so all over the place. And it wasn't just the quest objectives that were all over the place, the quest rewards were also all over the place. You could get gloves that had 100% more stats than any other glove in the game at an equivalent eye level. And then you get gloves with 0 secondary stats. It just doesn't make sense. But for me, all of that was quickly forgotten, even though I still had to do an escort quest. And the most enjoyable zone is this by far. The atmosphere in this zone was just so immaculate. Even though I'm slaughtering some innocent wildlife, I felt like I was studying an exam while listening to lo-fi music, an exam that I'm sure I'm going to fail. And so we just chill, maybe stare at a forest with the blockiest trees you will ever see, or try and kill a corrupted bear god. Whatever it was I was doing, I was actually enjoying it. Even doing an escort quest for an idiot in a tomb, and eventually reach Ice Crown. We go up here and liberate Crusader's Pinnacle, and do a pretty boring quest involving a pet. But as with everything good, it must eventually end, because soon we will reach level 61. And whenever you reach level 61, the game is going to pull you back forcefully so that you can do the current expansion. I wish there was a way for me to level without having to go to the current expansion. I haven't even seen the Lich King at all. I still have things to do in Ice Crown, and you're just gonna send me back? Really? Unfortunately, there is no way to stop Chromie from pulling you back to do the Dragonflight expansion. Also, since Ice Crown is not scaled to your level, the quest will give you absolutely 0 XP, so you can never finish leveling in Ice Crown, or any other zone in Northrend, or even other old zones. You will be forced to do the current expansion content. Thank you, Chromie, for ruining the experience. Here we are back in Orgrimmar, being force-fed the quest for the next expansion, Dragonflight. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we all know what we have to do, or what I have to do. Back to the Dragonlands. Now the Dragonlands are pretty beautiful, and this is only made better with the addition of dragon riding, which is 100% the best feature this expansion had. Giving the players a way to move at twice the usual mount speed, but actually requiring some skill by having you pilot a dragon. It fulfills players who have a need for speed, while also fulfilling players who want to explore the world. Because even though you are flying at twice the usual mount speed, you are going to go through the same areas so many times that you may as well be exploring it. And the fact that you have to actually be paying attention to your screen and your buttons makes the system a lot more engaging than pressing an auto walk button and then alt-tabbing to a YouTube video and then finding yourself dead 5 minutes later because you went too far. But not everything in this game is good because leveling is still a pain. If you've noticed, I've reached level 67 already. And if you're not aware of World of Warcraft leveling, whenever you level, the amount of stats you need to get 1% of a secondary stat, that is haste, critical strike, versatility, and mastery, also increases. Which means that as you level up, you actually lose a lot of power. And this especially feels noticeable once you reach level 66 onwards. For example, this is my character at level 61. I bought all of the things you could get in the auction house and replaced my inventory with it. And this is how your stats will look like. And by level 70, your stats will look something like this. You just went from 29 to 13 crit and 25 to 11 haste. And that has a pretty big effect on the way the game feels. This is more so true with haste than with crit, but some specs have talents that interact with crit. For example, fire and frost mages in general, and things like astral smolder for druids and chaos bolt for warlocks, just to give a few examples. And most of the time, the talent points you get when you level up do very little to mitigate the feeling of the loss of power, because there are talents that will just passively increase your damage based on a conditional. And in the worst case scenario, it adds another active ability. Because for example, if you add another active ability to your rotation, that is another second you have to spend pressing a button, meaning you still do your damage but at a longer time. Now I personally don't have an idea of how to fix this system, because if they don't reset secondary stats at the start of an expansion, then you could go to such insane numbers such as 100% haste, 100% crit, and that is also bad for the health of the game. But there's probably a way to mitigate the feeling of the loss of power after every expansion release. After just 14 minutes short of 36 hours, we finally reach level 70. And the game does have a lot of content to do, but a significant amount of them just reward you with something cosmetic. Now WoW is still an RPG, and what is the core of an RPG system other than to start from a pathetic weakling and get stronger either by gear, by level, and occasionally by exploring the world. And in WoW, once you reach level 70, all of your progress will be determined by your gear. And if you limit your content in WoW to things that will increase your power, the vast majority of the world simply becomes nil or cosmetic. You become limited to open world content, which is often considered a joke and also rewards you with a joke. You also have raids and dungeons, and PvP, which I personally don't care about, both of which reward you with gear that scale with the difficulty of the content you're doing. And since this is the only content in the game with a difficulty level, this is also the only mode that rewards you with endgame items. If you are a person who cares about how your character plays and feels, Raids and dungeons are simply inescapable, and we're only 36 hours into the game, so I decided to do open world content this time, and feast your eyes on open world content. Open world content in WoW is about as fun as the old escort quests. I'd much rather do another form of mind-numbing content, such as watching Skibidi Toilet on YouTube, rather than doing this garbage, because watching Skibidi Toilet takes no effort at all. Meanwhile, this actually requires you to put effort into it for absolutely nothing. And a lot of people will say, but you got a piece of gear from it. Why are you complaining? I'm complaining because you're getting pity gear for pity content. Why is there no content for one player to do that is both challenging and gives you very good rewards? In fact, they already have systems like this before, because I have fond memories of Visions of N'Zoth. Now for those who don't know, a Vision of N'Zoth was a feature in patch 7.3 of Battle for Azeroth, where you enter an instance by yourself or with a party if you want to, and go around killing bosses and enemies around a map on a timer, and depending on how many bosses you kill, you get better rewards, up to even heroic levels of gear. And did that break the game? No, because you could only do it once per week. A significant proportion of the more hardcore player base in WoW is absolutely against people getting gear, and I honestly don't understand why these people like to gatekeep the game so much. Because even if a random casual player gets mythic gear, what is the chance that you will ever interact with that person in the world? Zero. You can completely ignore their existence. If you're doing the most hardcore content in WoW, you are typically surrounded by like-minded people. You will never have to play with a casual player. And for the slightly less hardcore players in WoW who have to take chances on random people they find in the depths of nowhere, logs exist, and trials also exist. They're pretty much a requirement in the game nowadays. And for Mythic Plus, Raider.io exists. Why limit the gearing in an RPG that is all about gearing? Now, I'm not saying that you should just give out free mythic gear to people. Give solo content in WoW that is as difficult as Mage Tower and early Visions of N'Zoth, and make them give good rewards. Not like these world bosses where you could just turn off your monitor if you wanted to, and by the end you would still get a decent reward. And since we're already yapping so much, let me expound on another problem I think WoW has. This is one of the faction bases in WoW Dragonflight. This was introduced in patch 10.0 of the game, and the moment patch 10.1 was released, every single piece of gear here is essentially useless, unless you're out here collecting transmog, of course. And remember when Dragonflight first released and you had to kill a few rare mobs to get their items? Especially trinkets? That constituted a significant amount of the content in Dragonflight. And once again, they have been demoted to cosmetic-only role-like healers. And this also extends to old raids in the expansion, such as Aberrus and Vault of the Incarnates. There are so many cool items in the game, but everything that is considered current right now, once a new patch hits, is once again completely demolished. Unless of course they decide to reintroduce it using a fated season. And I know hardcore players are wary of this, because most of them don't want to do open world content and old raids all over again. And that is understandable, but now we have a good upgrade system. Why can't we retain certain items or purchase old items with the currency and upgrade them to the current eye level eventually? I feel like the game would be more fun in the end if we had more options to choose from, rather than just having one or two options. And I've been yapping for quite a while now, but we still have so many hours to burn. And I'm genuinely interested in how a raid plays without add-ons, especially without a damage meter. But I don't want to burden normal raiders with my presence, so instead we're going to choose the hardest difficulty of raid available in World of Warcraft, LFR, which stands for Looking for Raid. So this is an automated system where you're put into a queue and form a random group with random players. Now this is the easiest difficulty available for raids, but this is actually the most difficult one, and you will see that later. And now we're going to face Gnarlroot, one of our former allies turned enemy and is now a giant burning tree. Now raiding as a DPS is not as bad as I expected it to be. I was aware of my buttons, my defensives, any procs I might have gotten, and maybe a huge part of that is because I've been playing this game for quite a while now. Now what I don't like about the base UI are the nameplates, which are the health bars and names located on top of a mob. Now if you're a dot class like a Shadow Priest, the base nameplates are kind of hard to work with. They overlap frequently and they make it hard to see if you have the debuff on every single target. They're also pretty hard to click unless you alt-tab, but sometimes you want to click them because alt-tabbing is inefficient. I felt like I was blasting the boss, but without a damage meter, I can't know if I am actually damaging the boss at all. Maybe I'm doing less than the healer, who knows? But since no one's kicking me from the group, I'm assuming I'm doing okay, or at least doing something. Now if I was raiding in the higher difficulties normal and heroic, there's a very high chance that I would have been kicked out already of the group. Now in my opinion, DPS in raids have the easiest job of all time. So let's play the red-headed stepchild of any group, or the soulless masochist with a degradation fetish, otherwise known as healers. Now this was a big mistake for me, because I completely forgot I don't have any mouse over macros. And honestly, mouse over should just be baked into the base game already. So normally in WoW, in order to heal, you have to click the person and then click the spell, which means you have to find the person or their unit frame, which are the bars on the lower left, click on it, press your spell, at which point another healer would probably have already healed them. So what a mouse over macro does is, instead of having to select them, you can just hover your mouse over their nameplate and it will cast whatever spell you are clicking on. This saves you one click every time. You are basically doubling your efficiency. But since I didn't have that, I have to manually select everyone and then heal them. And it was not a fun time for me. I also didn't know if I was actually healing anyone at all. And therefore I come to the conclusion, DPS and healing meters are absolutely required in this game. There's no way you play this game without them. Because if you don't have them, how will you get feedback that you're not doing good? You need data. And we're not dumbass zoomers who base their life around vibe checks alone. Another problem this game has that is exacerbated with healers is something called the button bloat. For example, I'm currently playing a Holy Priest, and just for healing, you have a gigantic single target heal, slow but mana efficient big single target heal, fast but mana inefficient moderate heal, single target heal that jumps, healing over time that you never pressed, a huge AoE heal, efficient AoE healing on a cooldown, inefficient AoE healing, short range AoE healing that you need to charge up over time and also damages, AoE heal on a cooldown that also does damage, and an absorb shield. And those are just your healing spells. Plus you have 4 very big cooldowns that you press on very specific times on a fight. Also, a good healer also contributes damage to the group. And so as a Holy Priest, your damaging spells consist of a cheap spammable weak single target spell, a big single target damage spell on a cooldown, another big single target spell on a cooldown, a dot, a single target spell that deals more damage to enemies close to death, a pet that attacks and gives you back mana, a 2-minute button that makes you and another person go fast. But that's not all, because you also have utility and defensives, which include a movement speed spell, an offensive dispel, a defensive dispel, a mass defensive dispel, a threat drop, a damage reduction button, a get more max HP button, an AoE short range fear, a slow fall, a reduce the range at which enemies start smacking you button, a single target resurrect spell, an AoE resurrect spell, and let's not forget consumables, a combat pot to improve your damage or healing, a health stone for emergency healing, and a health pot for emergency healing. Did you understand all of that? That is the number of buttons you have to bind to a hotkey to be able to press on a keyboard or your mouse. And honestly, this is an insane amount of buttons for any new player to the game. And when I play a healer, I also have my damage buttons bound to a healing button. And this is the way I save keybinds. If you want to complicate your life more, you can also add 4 more buttons if you select specific talents too. And it looks like Blizzard does not care about this button bloat at all. Because the way the next expansion is looking, it looks like they're keeping this same number of buttons. This is a huge hurdle for newer players in the game. And not only is it a hurdle, I think it is a big design flaw in itself. What most players don't understand is that having these many buttons just lessens the impact of every single button you press. When you have 3 AoE healing spells that all practically do the same thing, but are now separated into 3 separate key presses, you're just slowing the game down and making each individual ability feel less impactful. And this problem becomes very significant with healing cooldowns. It used to be that you only had 1 or 2 healing cooldowns per player, but now you have 3 or 4. And if you have 3 or 4 cooldowns, then the game becomes very unbalanced. And so they have to nerf your base kit and make you weaker, and now all of your spells do even less than they used to, because if they don't, then you will become way too powerful. And another aspect of the button bloat that also affects lower level players as much as higher level players is the amount of buttons players have for defensives. Most classes have so much defensives and healing now that sometimes healing is a cosmetic role. In the lower levels, this means that healers have absolutely nothing to do, because your job is healing. And what are you going to heal when every single player can just press a button and they're back to full health? At that point, you just become a weak damage dealer. You may as well not play. This is also evident in high level play, as there are dungeons with low damage intake that you can just swap out your healer for a damage dealer for a while. But unfortunately, Blizzard does seem happy with their game design, as in the next expansion they don't look like they're interested in reducing the amount of buttons you have And in fact, they're adding even more buttons to some classes. But for now, all we can do is wait and see what Blizzard does. Now we finished the raid and all the expansion content. We've got ourselves some decent amount of gear, and it's only been 5 hours. Okay, what do we do? Oh, actually, I have a very degenerate idea. You see, this game has a very good profession system. You can practically fill all of your slots with crafted gear, even gear of mythic level. So how the gearing upgrade system works in World of Warcraft is that you use something called crests. Crests are obtained from every single game activity here. And there are 4 types from lowest to highest. You have Whelpling, Drake, Wyrm, Aspect. Now these crests can be upgraded to a higher level crest at a 1:6 ratio, so long as you reach certain gearing benchmarks in every single slot. So you can upgrade your gear to 450, to 463, to 476, and then finally to 486, and that is mythic level gear. But the question is, where can you get all of these crests if you never intend to do dungeons or raid at a higher level? Well, here's the answer for you. Welcome to the most degenerate activity I have ever done in my entire life. Do you see those green orbs? These green orbs are found in one zone out of the 4 in Dragonflight. It changes every week. Now when you fly over it, you get 2 of the lowest level crests. And if you want the nerd math, here it is. The lowest item level you can craft is 463, which requires a Spark of Dreams obtained in raids and in dungeons. Now it used to be there was a limit of them, but they have been uncapped since because it is now nearing the next season. Now to upgrade your crafted gear to the next item level, which is 476, you are going to need 45 Worm's Crest, and that is equal to 270 Drake's Crests, which means 1620 Whelpling's Crest. Now to upgrade further to 486, now you need 60 Aspect's Crest, which is equivalent to 360 Worm's Crests, 2160 Drake's Crests, and finally 12,960 Whelpling's Crest. And now we have 15 gear slots in WoW. And so if you want a crafted gear in every slot, you are going to need a grand total of 218,700 Whelpling's Crest. Now if you optimize your orb collecting route, you can actually get to around 700 Whelplings per hour, plus progress towards Carpal Tunnel Syndrome. And that means to obtain 218,700 Whelpling's Crest, you would need to fly around non-stop, no sleep, for a total of 312.49 hours, or 13.01 days rounded down to 13 days, which is also coincidentally the amount of time for your boyfriend/girlfriend to finally realize that you're crazy and leave you. For comparison, playing WoW for 100 hours in a month is equal to 3.33 hours every day. So 312 hours means playing WoW for 10.4 hours a day. Do note that this also excludes the materials you need to obtain to craft all of that gear, which requires either farming or a lot of stored gold. Not to mention all the money you need to pay in real life for your mental health therapy. And since we're only slightly mentally unwell, I only spend 50 hours but only get 6,000 crests. And then I decided it was time to try to upgrade my gear, because I don't have the achievement milestone to start crafting 476 gear. And it was in this screen that I realized that I didn't farm the other thing I needed, because for some reason you have to farm another currency called Flightstones, which you will need to upgrade your gear. But thankfully they are not required in crafting. But unfortunately I do run out, and finally clarity comes into my mind. What am I doing? And here I am doing the most unfun thing I have ever done. You know, I still have a few hours to burn, and I know the perfect way to end my journey. And the circle finally closes. Back to Northrend. Back to Warcraft 3. It's a shame I didn't get to experience this expansion with Retail WoW's gameplay. But after 100 hours of no add-ons, did I have fun? I guess I was actually having fun. Questing in Eversong Woods and Ghostlands without heirlooms is actually pretty fun, marred only by the amount of text you have to read for the quest. I managed to find the time to enjoy the atmosphere of the old world, and the old world did have a lot of charm. Even LFR raiding had its charm. I just didn't know if I was actually helping my team. But after that, everything went downhill. There is no content to do inside of the game that will reward you with gear that isn't spamming dungeons or going to raid, and the open world content just ain't it. And who knows, maybe one day Blizzard will release a piece of content that is tailored to me, where I can level in a zone and experience it and not have to be dragged back to Dragonflight, with an infinitely scaling system like Azerite power, and eventually solo dungeons and raids myself. Who knows? But for the first time in a few years, my subscription is gone and I have not yet bought the next expansion. Who knows what the future will bring? And that is all for this video, and thank you for watching. And please don't forget to press that like and subscribe button if you enjoy this content. I have started a Patreon and Discord. This will be included in the description down below. Thank you all, and I will be seeing you next time in another MMO.